Hey everyone, we're back with some more Greece information. Today specifically, we're going to be talking about our first city-state, which is Sparta. Tyrants began to appear as people became unhappy with the government. The definition of a tyrant is someone who takes power by force and rules with total authority. Initially, tyrants had the support of the people. When we think of a tyrant today, we think of them as a harsh ruler. A tyrant has a negative connotation. We don't look at tyrants as good leaders. In Greece, however, it was a little bit different. Tyrants acted wisely and fairly, and most of the time had the support of the people. Tyrants became popular by building temples and markets. But even though the Greeks were somewhat satisfied with having a tyrant in power, they really wanted rule by all, not just rule by one person. Tyrants eventually fall out of favor, and most city-states select a new form of government. Sparta is going to become an oligarchy. The definition of an oligarchy is a government in which a few people hold power. And we're going to take a look at how that's structured a little bit more later in this PowerPoint. Sparta needed more land as their population began to grow. The Spartans did not set up colonies, though. Instead, they just conquered and enslaved their neighbors. Those enslaved neighbors were known as helots. Military was very important to Sparta. Why do you think that is? Obviously, if you are conquering your neighbors, you obviously have to be pretty good at war in order to conquer them. And then if you continue to conquer and you have all of these helots, you have to keep them under control and keep them from rebelling. The Spartans began to fear that the helots would rebel. And I know that my video is blocking a little bit here, but the government is going to train men and boys for war. Basically, the purpose of that is to prevent any type of rebellion from happening. Boys are going to leave home at the age of 7. And I'm going to move this over here so that you can see this a little bit better. To live in barracks. They were treated harshly to make them tough. At the age of 20, they're going to enter the regular army, and then they would live in the barracks for 10 more years. Move it back. A normal meal for them is going to be black broth, which consisted of pork boiled in animal blood, salt, and vinegar. So obviously not something too appetizing there. The Spartans would return home at the age of 30. Even though they returned home, they were still expected to stay in the military until the age of 60. The Spartans expected to win on the battlefield or die trying. They were never supposed to surrender. There is a quote on page 127 of your textbook. Obviously, I'm not going to make you open a textbook or anything. But the quote basically says that Spartans were expected to come home carrying their shields or being carried on them. That's basically saying you're coming home a winner or you're coming home dead because you died trying. Women in Sparta are going to be trained in sports, specifically running, wrestling, and throwing the javelin. The goal here was to keep them fit in order to be healthy mothers. Women would live at home while their husbands were in barracks. This allowed them to own property and to go where they wanted. So they're going to actually have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more rights than a lot of other women in Greece and in the world at this time, even though it's still not much. So what type of government do we say that Sparta had? It was an oligarchy. We're going to talk about how an oligarchy is structured. At the very top, we're going to have 2 kings. The 2 kings are going to be in charge or head the Council of Elders. The Council of Elders is going to be 28 citizens, all of them over the age of 60. The council pretty much is going to come up with laws. Their job then is to present those laws to the assembly. The assembly would be all Spartan men over the age of 30. The assembly would vote on laws. So you have the 2 kings at the top. The council comes up with laws. The assembly passes the laws. They would also choose 5. I've heard this word pronounced 2 different ways. I've heard it as E4s and F4s as well. I'm going to say E4s just because I feel like the other one sounds like I'm trying to not say a bad word. E4s are going to enforce laws and collect taxes. So they're going to kind of be like a police officer judge in Sparta. The Spartans did not want anyone questioning their ways, so they're going to do two things to help prevent this from happening. They're going to discourage foreign visitors, and they're going to ban travel abroad for any reason other than the military. So, for example, if me and Miss Bentz were like rivals, I didn't want anybody questioning my teaching. I'm going to discourage foreign visitors. So I'm going to make sure that nobody from Miss Bentz's class can come into my class, because they might come in and be like, oh, why do you do that? Miss Bentz does this and it's so much better. I obviously don't want that. I want all of my students to think that what I'm doing is the best, of course. And then kind of vice versa here, I'm going to prevent any of my students from going over into Miss Bentz's class, because they might not want to come back. They're going to be like, wow, this is so much better. And that was kind of the thought process of Sparta, is if they could keep everybody in Sparta and prevent outsiders from coming in, people basically wouldn't know any better, and they would think everything that's happening is good. Sparta was able to keep control of the Helots for over 250 years. They are known for having some of Greece's best soldiers. However, they're going to fall behind in trade, science, and other areas. One of the things you might have noticed as we went through this today, when we were talking about what life was like for boys and girls in Sparta, school was not an option. There was not school in Sparta. So you're really not going to have any type of advancements in any type of academic field. So they're going to be way behind most other Greek city-states and countries in the world at this time. That's it for Sparta.